Yeah, that's what I understand. And with Sterling Silliphant, who wrote In the Heat of the Night, and he also wrote and was one of the producers on, I just went blank on that show. It traveled across the United States. It was in the 60s. It was kind of based on Jack Kerouac and these two guys traveling in a Mustang across the country. And Hal Warren had a bit part in it as it traveled through his area in Texas. And he somehow met Sterling Silliphant, who was working on it, and made a bet with him in either a bar or coffee house, not sure. But Hal kind of, yeah, I mean, it's a better story, but but I did a lot of research, and yeah, Hal actually was walk-on a couple of those episodes of that show, and he had written a lot of scripts. He had a lot of things going, and wanted to get into the movie business. So, you know, it just all really fit together really well. Well, I know that Hal actually, in my book, I talk about that he did stand-up comedy around New York, even at 16 years old. He wanted to be a comedian. He wanted to be an actor. So he wanted to be a writer. He did a lot of things. He was very creative in the Army. He wrote things. He directed a USO type shows. Well, anyway, he was in this play, and it happened that he looked around this play, and everybody he wanted in this idea he had written was there, and he just saw this opportunity. So he went to the actors and told them what parts that he imagined them playing, and as community theater people are, they jumped on board wholeheartedly, and as community people, creative people who collaborate are, no one wants to be the one to say, I'm not doing this anymore, you know? You don't get halfway in and quit. So that's kind of how it came about. It just was one of those trains, you know, you see going to crash, but what are you going to do, you know? You got to finish it. Well, my dad knew Hal through the theater for a while, you know, not well, but, you know, on set, I remember Hal was just pretty focused, you know, just, I mean, time and budget, just getting stuff done, and just kind of stomping around and growling out orders. And it's funny because my impression of him as a 6-year-old at the time was that he didn't have any kids. You know, I felt like a prop. I mean, he wasn't mean to me or anything. I was like, I mean, you can see when he picks me up, I'm like a bag of potatoes, you know, over his shoulder. So, you know, so, but it's funny, you know, when I did my research writing my book, I found out that he had 5 children at that point, you know, whoa. And he was on his 3rd marriage, so, you know, he's interesting guy. Yeah. But you know, the other people on set, well, Bernie, the director of photography, I mean, Robert Guidry, director of photography, and Bernie Rosenblum, who was a stunt man and coordinator, and he also played the kissing teenager in the car, and that was his car. Those 2 guys really messed with Hal quite a bit, you know, because they were best friends and jokers, so they made the hours a little easier, I think, for themselves anyway, not for Hal. I did the research on that particular camera, and I'm trying to think, but no more than 32 seconds. I mean, I think it's 32 seconds. Yeah, right. The wind you know, that camera worked really well in World War II. Why wouldn't it work for Hal, right? Yeah, yeah. Well, it was basically 3 weekends and a couple of really long nights. Well, it's interesting because in my research, again, I learned that one of the women actually broke her leg during one of the very brief rehearsals in the beginning, and her father was going to sue Hal. So to circumvent that, he kept her in the film and made some promises to the dad, but she is the girl in the car with Bernie. She's got a cast on her leg in that car. But yeah, she ended up probably happier than most because she really wanted to be an actress and she wanted to be a standout, and this way she wasn't dressed like all the other girls. You know, my mom had made the costume. She made the robe for the master, and she made the wives' dresses. And she had made my dress, but not special for the movie because she pretty much made all my clothes. So I was bummed out that I didn't get any special costume. And when I saw that little mini wife dress, I was so happy. Because then I got something special, you know. It was pretty cool. Well, I loved it because my dad was in the theater. He did a lot of theater, and I grew up with that, and it was my favorite place to be, was at the Festival Theater. So when I had this opportunity to be in something with him, it was, you know, a real dream for me to spend time with him, and I loved being around the actors and the sets and poking around and stuff. And I was a very observant, independent kid, so it worked pretty well. I didn't really get in anybody's way much. You know, I was just kind of a quiet observer, but I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed watching the girls, you know, but I probably wasn't as interested in them as I was just poking around in the desert. And you know, I remember John Reynolds, Torgo. He was, gosh, he was like 24, 25 at the time. Just a really sweet guy, and very, he was very deep emotionally and creatively, and shorter of stature. I think he was shy, and he just seemed really comfortable with me. And I knew him anyway because my dad and I would go visit him on occasion, and you know, we knew him. One month to the day before the premiere and 1 month after his birthday. Right in between. Yep. Yep. Yeah, I remember very clearly. My mom and I, that Monday, we were on our way to school because she was a teacher at the same school that I was in second grade, and we were heading to school, and she heard it on the radio, and she just gasped and pulled over and had to collect herself. I just remember sitting in the car with her going, wow, what just happened, you know? And then later overhearing people talking about it and just kind of getting a concept of that finality. It was, I was a very observant kid. Like I said, I'm an artist. I'm just, it's amazing the things that I do remember. It's so clearly, you know. Including mine. Yeah, 6-year-old. Yeah. It was awful. Oh, well, as you'll see, yeah, shortly. Yeah. No, I did not. Nobody bothered to tell the little kid anything. It was horrible. It was so humiliating. I mean, I didn't know until we're in the theater at the premiere.
We're almost there, honey. Just a little while longer and your vacation starts.
I'm getting cold, Mother, and hungry.
No, they they drove 800 miles to Dallas to a sound studio, 4 of them, and William Bryan Jennings, who played the sheriff, and his wife and children, because they dropped them off at her mother's house on the way. And well, it's like in a big station wagon, all of them, my dad, Al, William Bryan Jennings, and his wife and kids. I think that was right. Who else would it have been? That's it. 3 of them. And one woman who was never credited, but then when I researched for my book, I found out who she was. And it was actually Hal's sister-in-law. And not only that, but get this, that voice, as awful as it is, that poor woman was given no time to view the script, or she didn't probably even know she was doing a child's voice until they're in the studio. But she was trained to be an opera singer. Can you believe that? Yes, at the Capri Theater, which is no longer there, but there's another theater right in the spot. So yeah. Oh yeah. So low budget, and so Hal was. I mean, he was a salesman. This guy could talk anybody into anything, as you will see, and he had. He had borrowed some of those, those big lights from the car dealership that scan the sky. He borrowed a couple of those, so that was in front of the theater. He found a red carpet somewhere, and he invited all the dignitaries, the mayor and the sheriff and all these people, and he wanted it to look good, so he hired, you got to know El Paso, and downtown El Paso is literally on the border of Mexico. It's within walking distance to the bridge. I used to ditch high school as a 9th grader and walk across to Juarez and hang out there all day so I wouldn't get hassled, I'd walk back in time to go home. It was crazy. So that's how close we are. So Hal hired the little street urchin kids, the ones that are selling chiclet gum or washing your windshield. He hired them for, who knows, a couple bucks, and he gave them all little pads of paper and those little short pencils, and they were the autograph seekers. So I'm not kidding. I have pictures. Yeah. So there's these little kids that don't speak any English, and there's all these white actors, all dressed up in tuxes and crap, and it's just ridiculous. So, Hal made it a big deal. So what he'd done was he rented one limo, and he had all the cast and crew. We parked, wherever downtown, and then we all waited in the alleyway behind the theater. And then the limo would come and pick up a group of us and drive around and drop us off with the lights and the red carpet and the paparazzi. And then it would dump us and drive around, pick up a few more. I remember, then I was 7 years old, and I remember thinking, doesn't anybody but me notice it's the same car and driver? There were things like that throughout the filming, too, that I kept thinking, am I the only one that notices this? Well, my dad wanted to make sure that we had good seats. So we sat probably about 5th or 6th row center. And some of the other people apparently were a little more informed, like Bernie and Bernie Rosenblum and Bob Guidry, because they'd already seen the film. So they kind of stayed on the edges towards the back, I understand. But we didn't. And anyway, the lights go down, and there was some shorts, as they did in those days. And then the movie starts. And right away, it was like, I remember just having my eyes riveted on the screen. All I cared about was seeing me, little kid. But I do remember some Snickers and some noises going on around me, you know. And then the movie gets going, and man, we were trapped, you know, because I mean, my dad's the star. What is he going to do? Get out and go, excuse me, and pull his family out? You know, we were in the middle of the row, so we were stuck. And so as soon as it was over, God, what is it? I thought of it as like a heist, you know. We'd all pulled this heist off, and everybody disappears at the end, and nobody ever talks about it again, you know. I mean, it really was like that. And El Paso is a large city, but it's very close-knit. It probably still is in terms of the creative community. And my dad really was like one of the leading community theater actors in El Paso. There was only 2 community theaters and then the college. So, and everybody revolved around that. And so the entertainment writers and the people like that, they were very kind. They really didn't write much at all about it. They just let it, they just like, you know, let it die. But that's why I remember so much, because it was such a special time. I tell people it's like your favorite birthday, you know, your best vacation. You're going to remember details about it. And the fact that nobody talked about it after that, and I couldn't find it. I looked for it, you know, once I got into high school and when I got older, and I searched for it. I went to college libraries. This is all before the internet, and there was no trace of it. And so I'd given up. And 27 years go by, and January 30th, 1993, my dad calls me. He's in Oregon, and I'm in California. I'm married. I have a small child. And he calls me, he says, "You'll never believe what I just saw on television." It was on MST, and it was crazy. I mean, he was a fan, and he was sitting there watching one Saturday afternoon, or Sunday, I can't remember what day it was on, but he was watching it and nodding off, taking a nap, and then he heard this strangely familiar music, and he opened his eyes, and there he was. So, you know, I held on to those memories so tight, and my friends that I still know from high school remember me talking about it, believing that I'd never see it again. So it's pretty remarkable. In fact, that day, by the time he called me, because he couldn't pick up the phone while it was on, you know, and he called, and it was over. So I turned on, it was on Comedy Central, so I turned on the television, and at that time there was an 800 number in the bottom corner of the screen. So on impulse, I just called that number. I was desperate. It's like, this is the first link I've had to it since 1966. So I called the number, and a young man named Matthew answered, and he said he was in the HBO offices in Manhattan, but that's where he physically was. And I said, "You just played a movie that my whole family was part of, and I've been looking for it most of my life." I said, "Is there any chance I can get a copy?" And he says, "Well, what was it called?" And I told him, and there's this long pause, and I thought that my heart was beating, and I thought maybe he hung up on me, you know, or we had a bad connection, and I was nervous, and all of a sudden he blurts out, he goes, "Oh my God, are you Debbie?" It was my first indication. I thought all my life I was the only one that ever cared about this thing, was looking for it, and now there it is. It was insane. Yeah. Forward by Joel Hodgson on my book. Oh, he did, and he was so sweet. I mean, he and I this is right before the Bring Back MST thing. In fact, I didn't even know they were doing that when I contacted him. So my timing was, it's the will of Manos. Everything that happens here is the will of Manos, because having that opportunity, because he actually gave me quite a bit of time, and we had some long conversations, and it was really cool to get his take on Manos. But he always said that he didn't feel that they were really responsible for it taking off. I mean, because it was completely against their better judgment to do this film. And he says he never felt like it was one of their best episodes by any means. But the film itself has something that just captivates people. Well, I don't think we ever actually saw it or thought of it as funny, you know. It's like, for my parents, it was probably just an unfortunate blip in their lives. For me, it was something precious, something really important, like a really, you know, just special time with my dad. But the minute it was found and I saw it on MST, I was laughing as hard as anybody. And so is my dad. I mean, we get it, you know? And when Ben Soliday found the original work print and restored it in HD Blu-ray, he did a little documentary with it, and part of the extras that he put on that was filming my dad and I watching, or, you know, recording us while we watched Manos Hands of Fate together. And that was interesting, because that's the first time my dad and I watched it together since that fateful premiere in 1966. So we're watching it, and my dad at some point says, he's like, "Oh, Lord," he goes, "this is terrible." And I go, "Well, yeah, Dad, it is the worst movie ever made." He goes, "Oh, no, but this is really awful." Well, what I've noticed over the years is the creativity. The fans are some of the most amazing people, and they're in my tribe. I mean, when I grew up, I was a huge Fireside Theater fan, and so I get it. You know, it's like it's similar, and they're so creative. It's like I know people that work in minimum wage jobs that are fans, and neuroscientists that are fans. I mean, it's like the range of people, but we all share these things together. And a lot of people, many of the creative projects that have come about inspired by Manos happen because of people going to film school and learning about Manos in film school taught us everything not to do in filmmaking. And so they become inspired by it. I mean, look at Rachel Jackson, Manos Hands of Felt, the puppet theater. She's my assistant director on our film, Manos Returns. And I just celebrate and embrace all these projects and all these things that people are doing. It's just remarkable to me. I love that Manos is so inspiring to people on a lot of different levels. Yeah. You know, gosh, I guess my very favorite, and it's just because of riff tracks, when they did it the second time, is where I'm on the couch and my parents are arguing, staring at the painting, and I get up and walk out, and they riff, "I'm out of here, I'm going out for a smoke." That's actually my favorite. I mean, it's, you know, I can't say I have a favorite part in the real film, except, seeing my dog, my Doberman. He was our family pet, and it's always cool to see Shanka again. Oh God, he was a doll. Yeah. Well, like you can't tell, right? Oh. Yeah, gosh, I wrote it down here. Crypticon. It's going to be at Crypticon Seattle premiering. We'll be there May 5th, 6th, and 7th. So it's going to be on Friday night at 9 o'clock at Crypticon. And then we're having a lot of inquiries from other theaters and places around the country. So we're just trying to we're just figuring it out right now. But we'll be having other screenings in other places. But we chose Crypticon, and Crypticon chose us because it's really where us producers met. It's like our home con, That's where it all came together. I'm Debbie. Debbie's back. But not in that little dress. No, that's just wrong. But no, I'm, you imagine if Debbie was kept by the cult after 50 years, she's going to be, she's not a normal person. So anyway, I grew up, now I'm in charge. I'm Debbie. I'm in charge of the Manos cult, and things are kind of falling apart a little bit, and the master is there trying to hold things together as well. So what we did was we brought together everybody that's still living. My dad, who's passed now, but he got to come back in his role as the master. Diane Marie, who played my mother in the original, is in this film, playing my mother a little crazier after 50 years. And the son of the sheriff, William Bryan Jennings, is our sheriff and looks and sounds a lot like his daddy.
What were you doing, Torgo?
Hello, officers. How are you doing today?
I'm Sheriff Jennings, and this is Deputy Georgia.
I'm Clara, by the way.
I am Torgo.
Me, Jay. She, Mickey. She, what?
Manos knows all. Manos is all.
This is starting to feel oddly like a Dear Friend House letter.
Have you had a visitor, Mother?
You shall have a new master. Praise be to Manos. Praise be to Manos. Praise be to Manos.
And then a really amazing thing was in the original Manos, the soundtrack is, it's an original soundtrack, and but the musicians were not credited. A lot of people weren't credited in the original film. And there were people whose names were in there that weren't in the film. I mean, Hal just kind of, it seemed like he wrote it on a napkin like he did the bet, I think that's that woman's name. Oh, never mind. So anyway, I found out who the vocalist was on Forgetting You. So when you're listening, Forgetting You and Love Inside This Magic Circle, I think there might be another song, but that's the female vocalist is Nikki Mathis, and she'd been a singer for all these years. She put together this amazing women's music festival in, I believe, New Hampshire. I'd have to get more information to that. But she still sings, and we got her on our soundtrack redoing those songs. So we recreated them. Yeah. Oh. Well, it's not in the budget. No limos. You know, at Crypticon they actually have a very cool display of hearses. Maybe one of them will at least let us sit in their hearse or something. Well, I was a professional. I did faux finish, you know, wall treatments, marbling, plaster, all kinds of murals, trompe l'oeil for like 20 years. And then when I decided that I didn't want to climb high ladders and scaffolding anymore, so I do my own art. And it started with where I live in the Northwest. I would see these old doors like leaning against a barn or on a burn pile, and I just couldn't stand to think of them getting destroyed. So I would collect these things because I have some property here, and you know, so I was becoming a hoarder. So anyway, then I started cutting them up into panels and turning them into art. And my art is, as you'll see on my Facebook page, very symbolic and spiritual, and each piece that I paint tells me what it's going to be. It's interesting, you know. It's like I feel like I sense the history in these old doors and window frames. So that's my art. I do all kinds of things. Like, well, I made this. This is a prop from Manos Returns. And this is a prop from Manos Returns. What happened to Torgo's hand, right? Yeah, I made that. And the painting, and, oops. Ah! Okay, I'm okay. I'm being attacked by it, but look, my dad made the Torgo staff, the original one, and I made this one just like my dad did. Out of metal. They won't even let me take this into the some of the cons, because they call it a weapon. I'm like, really? But yeah, I do a lot of art, and then I have my blog, which I started writing in 2012, and then I stopped for a few years. But I'm writing again every Tuesday, every Torgo Tuesday. I have a post, and that's Debbie's Manos blog spot. My art on Facebook is Jackie's Art, and that's Jackie with an EY. And then I just started doing a podcast as well called Jackie's Hand of Horror, and I have a couple co-hosts with Rachel Jackson of Hands of Felt and Tanya Atomic, my director from Manos Returns. And we explore a different subject every 2 weeks, and I'm having a good time with it. I think we're on our 5th episode coming up next. Yeah, I'll post the links again, but you can buy it directly from me, signed. You can get it on Amazon, but it won't be signed. So, and then also, I just mentioned this briefly because the press release hasn't really come out yet, but I can say this, I believe, is there's a comic book coming up called, it's called Manos, the Debbie Chronicles. It's all about me. Yeah. No, they're going to be doing a contest here pretty soon for writers and artists for the first episode, and I believe the person who wins is going to get a ticket to San Diego Comic-Con. So the way it's going to work, it's through Pulsar Entertainment, and the way it's going to work, it's going to be online, and every couple episodes are going to be a different artist and graphics team. So we're following a theme, a basic storyline, but it's always going to be evolving and changing based on perspective and different artists. So to me, that's one of the most amazing things with Manos is that collaboration again. I'm totally excited about this. And I get to be a badass, you know, fighting supernatural evil. It's Ah! I love it. I love it. Oh my God. Oh, you're getting pictures, right? I mean, you'll be posting. Great. That is so totally cool. Yeah. Now you have alcohol there, right? I mean, like beer and wine. Oh, good. I'm just saying, you know, you're gonna need it. Oh, there's so many stories. When this whole thing began and I started seeing all the Manos mythology online, you know, I started going into chat rooms and saying, hey, that's not true, and this is why I know. And it was just an exercise in cleaning up the crazy stories. And turns out, you know, the real stories are way more interesting.